In this chapter, we are going to go more in depth into the forearm. Like we mentioned in the last chapter, you really can simplify this into three main shapes. We have the ridge muscles here, we have the extensors here, and then on the other side we have the flexors right here. But it's also useful to get some more detail in this, and also there are some muscles we haven't talked about that are actually contributing to the form and breaks it up a little bit more. So we are first going to start talking about the ridge muscle. These are these two guys that go right here. These are technically different muscles, but these two guys, they pretty much always form a common mass. Occasionally you can see that there is a little bit of separation in very extreme cases, but in the majority of the cases, these two guys are going to form one common mass, which is really cool. So these two guys are forming a common mass, and they're going from the bottom part of the humerus, but not from the epicondyles, just from more of the bottom part, and they form one common mass going all the way throughout. The main body of it is this part here, and then it forms this tendinous sheet, or more of this tendinous line rather, that goes down in here. Just specifically where these muscle origin from and attaches, I don't find to be particularly important. I don't think this is something you're going to be using like in your day-to-day. I know I am not. So it's more important just to consider these guys going down and attaching down in this area. If you're a doctor or physiotherapist, this becomes important. We're artists, we're not saving lives. Let's keep this a little bit simpler than that. But these two are really important in this sense that they do go from the humerus up here to probably around like the third mark or so. So it's around here, and then it goes down. What's important as well is when we're starting to see how these intersect with the bicep, tricep, and brachialis, because you see here you have the tricep here, you have the brachialis muscle right here, and then we have the bicep right here. So it really goes in between, or rather they really go in between the brachialis muscle and the tricep muscle. And the more you learn about anatomy, the easier it honestly gets in one way, because it's like a bit of a puzzle that the more you learn about, the more these pieces are going to fit in. Like let's say you don't know the exact nature of these two muscles, there's still going to be something missing here, and then you'll just more intuitively start to understand where they do belong. In terms of their specific names, this guy here is called the brachioradialis, and this guy here is called the extensor carpi radialis longus. And whenever you see an insane name like that, you have extensor, means it's an extensor, it's going to extend the hand. Carpi goes into the hand, into the carpals. Radialis, which means the side of the radius, and longus just means it's the long muscle. If you see longus, you're going to have brevis as well. So the brachioradialis and the extensor carpi radialis longus. One hell of a mouthful. This is not technically correct, but it is quite useful, and tend to think about both of these two here just as the brachioradialis. And brachioradialis just means brachii from the arm, radialis to the radius. And then we have the extensor muscles. The extensor muscles are the ones that are going from up here. Remember the lateral epicondyle, lateral meaning outwards. And there are really three main muscles here that we have to talk about. There are technically four, but you reach a point of very diminishing returns here. But the first one is going to be this guy that we are seeing right here. So let's talk about this one real quick. If we just isolate this guy here, this is called the extensor carpi radialis brevis. That's basically the same as the other one here. Just remember, when we have the longest, then we have a brevis. So this just goes from up here as well, almost the same point, a little bit lower, and then it goes into the hand as well. And this is basically just a straight line that just goes down here and just connects down into the hand. The next one we're going to be talking about is going to be this guy here. This is a bit of a more of an important one, because this actually goes into the fingers. If you know the word digit, this is what we might refer to as a finger, then this name here is going to make more sense. This is the extensor digitorum. There's only one digitorum, or digit muscle, in the forearm. And this goes from around this point here as well. This is what we keep talking about, where we're dealing with the the lateral epicondyle, and this muscle just goes down here. And this is a large muscle compared to the other ones. And if there is like one main muscle you want to remember from this area here, that would be the extensor digitorum. And it does go into the fingers as well. That is important because you can see the tendons of this going into this. And this becomes important in the hand chapter, because what you can see is that everyone knows that you have tendons in the hand. You can see this on your fingers right away. Like if you try to like play around with your fingers or move them up and down, then you can see that there are clear tendons here. And the reason this is important to know that comes from this muscle is because if we were to just draw a line here, you see these all come from the same point. A huge mistake when it comes to doing the hands and the fingers is that you make them parallel. So the fingers are parallel and the tendons are parallel instead of coming from one point. So this becomes a bit of an important one there. And if you know about the extensor digitorum, then this becomes quite easy. And then we have another guy here. This is similar in naming to the other one. It goes from the same point up here and it goes down here. The difference is that the other ones here, they went to the radius, and you can see that in the name they have radius in it. Well, this one here is the extensor carpi ulnaris. The ulnaris means that it's going towards the ulna or going into the ulna. So it goes from the same point up here, which is again the lateral epicondyle, and it just goes all the way down here into the ulna. If we just check this out real quick, if we just go in here and isolate it, you can see how this is going. And you can really see that these three muscles, they basically just form this like more balloon shape that goes here, the American football shape, like so. Even though technically like one of them is going more out to the side, this is still practically useful. And then we have a muscle we haven't spoken about yet. This is not a crazy important one. This is kind of just lodged in here, and this is a muscle that specifically controls the pinky. And this is something you can see on like when the Renaissance and Baroque sculptors were flexing, they were like flexing their skills. You can see that sometimes they would just add this muscle here. This is not a crazy important muscle, but it has a pretty funny name, which is extensor digiti minimi. Just the minimi part is you think about the guy from Austin Powers, and this is a very tiny muscle. So technically there are 4 muscles in this area, but practically there are only 3 muscles we have to concern ourselves with. So to sum up this region here, we have the extensor carpi radialis brevis that goes from around up here as well, from the lateral epicondyle, and it goes all the way down like so. And then we have the extensor digitorum, big muscle that goes from here. Well, you know, big, everything is relative, goes all the way down here and connects to the fingers. And then we have the extensor carpi ulnaris that goes here and is going all the way down and connects up, pick a different color, and connects up into the ulna. And then we have this little guy here, extensor digiti minimi, that connects into the pinky. And all this is to say, this entire thing you can simplify down into one big shape like so. Like we said in the last video, one big shape like so that you can separate essentially into like thirds, where the middle third should be a little bit bigger, which technically would mean it's not a third, but you get my point. And then we have another one as well. This is a muscle that a lot of people miss. This is called the Anconius muscle. The Anconius muscle is a pretty awesome muscle. It's a pretty small muscle, and some people just don't really have any volume in this whatsoever. And some people, like weirdly enough, will have quite a large Anconius muscle. And this is a muscle that would go from basically the same point as well. It's not the exact same point, but again, anatomy is hard enough. We have to make concessions here in terms of accuracy. Use reference to get the exact points where they're going from, and then just use basic mnemonics or basic rules of memory to figure out where they're going so you can be approximately correct, but it's basically in the same spot as well as the other ones. And it goes just into the ulna, like you can see here. Again, the ulna is the one that connects to the pinky right here, and the radius is the one that goes here, and you can think about that because of the big radius of the thumb. So this connects right here. What's interesting about this is that you can see that there is actually quite a lot of curvature happening in the ulnar bone as well. And this basically attaches at the same spot as where the anconeus muscle. So what you can think about in terms of this is it's almost like you have a bone like so, that's straight. And then right here, you have an anconeus muscle that connects up like so. And this guy just pulls the bone more towards it. It's almost like it has a bit like a gravity device or something. So this is just like a nice little easy way to remember this. First, remember where the anconeus muscle is, but also just remember that there is an actual curve here. So it's almost like this is like just pulling the ulna forward. And again, it's really important to remember the ulna, because as you can see here, none of these muscles are going to be going across this border. This is called the ulnar furrow, and becomes incredibly important when you're dealing with sculpting, because it means that whenever you're sculpting the forearm, you can just draw in the ulna like so, and then you can essentially just like block in your other muscles. You can block in all the American footballs like so. So that's it for the top of the forearm like so, and or rather the outer part of the forearm, depending on how you are viewing it. And now let's look at the inner part of this. This is pretty complicated, but luckily this here actually forms a common mass. If you were to look at, like if you try to flex yourself now, or if you look at some reference of somebody who was like legitimately really strong, this here genuinely forms a common mass. And that's very, very good news for us, because this is also just complicated. It's not necessarily more complicated than the front here. Here we have 3 main muscles we have to remember. Then we have the ridge muscles. It's just more stuff to memorize. And honestly, it's hard enough to memorize stuff the way it is. Like there is a lot of stuff to memorize in the body. And the less we have to memorize, the easier this becomes. So this whole thing becomes one common mass, essentially, with the exception, or with the note rather, that down here you can see we have some tendons. And this depends quite a lot from person to person, but on some people you can see this very clearly, and some people you really can't. What's important about this is that you actually get some of these tendons right. For instance, this guy here, which goes into more of the pinky, you can often see quite a clear plane change right here. And the same with these two as well. This is the only thing you can really see on me. You can only see these 2 tendons right here going into it. But essentially, it's one common mass that goes like so, and they kind of go forward like so. And then you can see the tendons going out like so. And then you have another tendon going out of this shape, more like so. So that was 2 tendons, more like 1 tendon like so. And this whole thing is it's almost the same thing as you have with the other side of the arm, where these are going to go into the fingers as well. Now, one example we have to just talk about here, or one muscle rather we have to talk about, is this guy here. This is the pronator teres, and this would be the medial epicondyle, where all the other ones are going to, basically just towards the center, and this just goes diagonally across like so, and connects here to the radius. The way you can think about this is the radius as well. The reason I knew this was the radius, it's easy to get confused with this, but the reason I knew it was the radius is just because the radius is thicker down here as well. So just a nice little way to remember that. This is a muscle you're not going to see every single time, but it can be a muscle that you can see a bit of separation here, where you have this shape here, and then you have a bit of a separation between these muscles right here. And you can see that right here, you have essentially the separation between the ridge muscles going here, down like so, and then we have the flexors that goes down like so. And there's a bit of a separation here. This is where it is useful to simplify things down, because in most cases, you really cannot see this as 2 separate volumes. Here, this stuff here just merges essentially into like one volume here. This is the case for really a lot of things in the forearm, where the whole thing basically merges into like a few simple volumes, but particularly for this area here, where this stuff here essentially just goes into one volume, where you can see these parts as well. I really recommend when you're sculpting that You make sure that the bony parts, like the elbow and the 2 pointer bits right here, that these are very, very prominent when you're sculpting. Same with the ulnar furrow as well. Make it really prominent, really clear, because you can always simplify down this stuff later on as well. It's the same thing with the upper arm as well, where if you are incredibly developed, you will of course see separation between these muscles, even in some cases between the different heads of the muscles. But in a large case, in the majority of the characters you're sculpting, particularly if they are neutral, the entire body basically turns into a sausage. That's something you're going to see time and time again when it comes to the anatomy of different things. The whole thing basically turns into like simple volumes, and the value of knowing anatomy is really not so much that you can see every single muscle in the sculpt or in the drawing, but it's more that you have a reliable way of building up these volumes, so that you have, like, if you have a character, you might really only see that there's a little bit of separation here, a little bit of separation here. And if you don't know what's going on, you're just going to put them in the wrong spot. You're just going to do some weird, random stuff. But if you know what's going on, then you can build up a nice, credible character. This is a bit of a sidetrack here, but this is incredibly important, because a big mistake people do whenever they're learning anatomy is that they're like, I spent hundreds of hours learning all this anatomy. I memorized every single muscle, every single notch and bone and furrow and depression, everything. And now you want to show off. Now you want to put all this kind of stuff into your sculpts. And the better you get at sculpting, like the more accomplished you become as a sculptor, the less of this stuff you really put into it. The more you put in like hints of it here and there. But the more observation-based you become, and the less like pure origin and insertion focused you become. So that's just really important to keep in mind, that while it is really useful to memorize this kind of stuff to a degree, at the end of the day, you're here to create believable characters, and you're not creating like dictionaries or encyclopedias for doctors. We're here to create awesome looking characters, and that's really what's important. So just to sum this up as well, we have the three shapes, the three main shapes. We have the flexors going on this side. It's going to be flexing the hand. You can think about this in terms of like how it makes sense as well. You have some rope here from here. What happens when this rope gets shorter? Flexes the hand. On the other side, we have the extensors. What happens when you have rope from here to here? It's going to extend the hand. And then we have the ridge muscles. That is a volume that goes from here to here. And then with the addition of the anconeus, that goes from about the same point as the other ones as well. And it goes across here and attaches to the ulna. And then on the other side, we have the, let me see if I can find it here. We have the pronator teres that goes from this point here where all the flexors attach, and then it just goes in here into the radius. And at the end of the day, everything is wrapped in skin and fat, and you can really only see a few of these muscles unless somebody is incredibly flexed. So yeah, that is the forearm.